thank you for joining this session. Welcome to the first Southeast Asia track at Sankalp. This was the first year that Sankalp expanded its initiatives to Southeast Asia, reaching out to more than 50 social businesses and 10 partners, including investment houses, incubators, and networks from across the region. Vietnam, Cambodia, the Philippines, Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia were focus countries for this expansion. Before we begin introducing the panel for today, we'd like to show you a short video of the 6 finalist enterprises from Southeast Asia that were selected for the Sankalp Southeast Asia Awards. Can you play the video, please?
Bali Recycling, Indonesia. Bali Recycling operates an integrated waste management system that focuses on reducing, reusing and recycling while also producing upcycled products from certain waste components. They extract or produce valuable byproducts from solid waste. They also collect and process hazardous materials for businesses and households. They are pioneering waste management practices in Bali. Happinoi, Philippines. The Happinoi Store program focuses on establishing and managing sari-sari stores in the Philippines. Sari-sari is the Filipino word used for many of various kinds. Happinoi manages an end-to-end supply chain that coordinates delivery of goods to micro-retail outlets by working with a centralized distribution and logistics system. Happinoi is the only widespread distribution network in Philippines for the consumers at the bottom of the pyramid. Happinoi's ability to reach the last mile through its distribution network significantly impacts the lives of multiple stakeholders, including sari-sari store owners, small producers and consumers. Cocoa Board, Thailand. Started with the idea of using agricultural waste to make particle boards with the desire to stop deforestation and extend the life of living green forests for future generations. Cocoa Board produces and distributes green building material by processing agricultural waste. Driven by environmental and social missions, the enterprise aims to protect the environment through innovative technology while at the same time alleviate poverty amongst rural farmers. Bombastic Plastics, Indonesia. Bombastic makes products by directly reutilizing high-density polymer, more commonly known as HDPE plastic shopping bags. It makes durable leather-like material from discarded plastic shopping bags for the manufacture of consumer products. They have developed the innovative super cycling process that transforms raw material into a finished product. The super cycling process is unique and nobody else in the market implements such an environmentally friendly process to recycle plastic. Its unique processing methods allow them to convert waste plastic material in an extremely varied spectrum of textures and designs. Sunlabob, Vietnam. Sunlabob has successfully developed and pilot-tested several innovative solutions that provide affordable off-grid lighting solutions and clean drinking water to rural households in Laos. It generates electricity through renewable resources and other applications by reducing the reliance on kerosene and diesel generators. Sunlabob makes renewable electricity and integrated equipment available for income generation, helps combat poverty, and provides access to safe drinking water through locally established micro-enterprises. Their efforts also reduce exposure to diseases. Sunlabob has impacted 20,000 direct beneficiaries and 100,000 indirect beneficiaries. Marine Gifts, Vietnam. Marine Gifts Limited provides vocational and life skill training for women living in and around marine protected areas in Vietnam. They provide skill training to women to produce indigenous crafts. Marine Gifts also works on raising awareness about marine conservation and livelihood development of local communities. They support community-based tourism and handicraft business development in the marine protected areas.
I'd like to just make a small correction. Sanlabob operates from Laos and not Vietnam as mentioned in the video. Now to introduce you to the panel for today. The topic that we're going to be discussing today is building an India-Southeast Asia social enterprise corridor. I'd just like to give you a quick background before calling our esteemed panel on stage. Home to 3.6 billion people, almost every country in Asia is growing increasingly restless in the face of multiple development shortfalls. While traditional methods of alleviating poverty continue to receive impetus, a fresh movement, widely known as social enterprise, is finding its place as an instrument to further inclusive growth in Asia. While social enterprise is still nascent in the region, some countries, such as India, Thailand, Indonesia, have emerged as frontrunners in this movement. What's interesting is that many of these countries face similar challenges to scale and sustainability, such as access to finance, navigating the regulatory environment, and retaining superior talent. In this context, there's both a growing need and an opportunity to build a corridor of communication and learning between social enterprise players in India and Southeast Asia, sharing best case practices, finding solutions to common problems, and speeding up the flow of funding across countries are founding blocks for this social enterprise corridor. Today's panel will discuss trends in social enterprise across the region, common challenges and solutions across India and Southeast Asia, and the case and ways of building this corridor. We have a very knowledgeable lineup of panelists here today. Our co-moderators are Anurag Agarwal, COO and co-founder of Intellicap, and Unmesh Brahme, CEO of CXO Sustainability Partners Worldwide. Anurag is Chief Operating Officer and co-founder of Intellicap. He's been part of a pioneering team of individuals involved in conceptualizing and executing the franchising of microfinance across India. At Intellicap, he oversees financial modeling, equity valuations, business planning, and strategic advisory engagements. Unmesh is a Yale World Fellow, founder chairman of Sustainability CXO Partners, and co-founder of Climate Civics Institute. With over 2 decades of experience, Unmesh has contributed in a significant manner to the development of high-impact community outcomes and business-aligned innovation during his work with HSBC India and Ogilvy India Head of Corporate Social Responsibility. I'd like to invite Anurag and Unmesh to please join us on stage. The panelists for today are Shalaka Joshi, who's Managing Director of Unitas Impact. Shalaka, please join us on stage. Atul Joshi, who's the head of marketing at EnviroFit. Mark Ruiz, who's founder of Happy Noi. And Scott Lawson, who's the CEO of SoAsia. I now hand this over to Unmesh and Anurag to take forward.
Sure. Thank you, Dipti. We are here to today discuss a very unique concept of collaboration across borders. And clearly, as per the brief you would have seen in your handouts, it's something which is poised to happen primarily because of the growth rates which we see across South Asia and Southeast Asia. So without much ado, in terms of how that is going to happen, I would reserve my perspectives for the very end, but I would like to turn over to the panelists on the stage today, starting from my left, and ask them to talk very quickly. You have seen videos of some of them, but ask them to talk very quickly on the work you do, the region you represent, and your initial thoughts on interpretation of the corridor concept so that we can have a lively discussion later on. We are going to go step by step across all the panelists and then make it very interactive in terms of asking all of you in the audience by a show of hands as to what type of institution you represent. what are your pain points, so that the panel could then deliberate on those pain points and make it fairly interactive rather than we saying lots of things. So that's the overview and format. So please.
Yeah. So good afternoon. My name is Mark Ruiz from the Philippines. As seen in the video, I'm a co-founder and managing director of Happy Noi. So basically, we do two things. One is we empower women at the base of the pyramid who own and run these very small shops called Sari Sari stores. So we help them grow their business. And as we grow their business, we then connect and organize them into a supply chain so that we could bring, aside from soft drinks, noodles, and coffee, to poor communities, as well as medicine. We're very interested in solar products, as well as mobile money, and provide access to the BOP on these other products and services. So essentially, if you think about that, we see ourselves as a distribution platform. And my thoughts on the corridor really is we have to go beyond this mindset of not invented here. And we're a very collaborative enterprise. So the lifeblood of what we do is to work and connect with other partners. And that basically means going beyond our own boundaries. So we could source solar products beyond the Philippines. We could look at technology implementations in other areas in Southeast Asia. And on the flip side, what would be very interesting is to bring the Happy Noi concept to other geographies as well. So those are my initial thoughts.
Thank you, Max. Good afternoon, my name is Atul Joshi and I am representing Envirofit India Private Limited. Envirofit India Private Limited is basically into the segment of indoor air pollution, which is caused due to traditional stoves, which are firewood burning stoves. And nearly half the population of the world today still using firewood as a basic fuel for preparing their daily meals. So Envirofit India has designed a couple of products which are known as smokeless stoves, and we are distributing these stoves in Asia Pacific region. And till date we have successfully distributed something like 3 lakh plus units in India alone. We are looking for expansion beyond India, and as he rightly said, we can definitely share a couple of things between India and Southeast Asia region. Like he said, we can definitely use ready-made distribution network which he is having in Philippines for distribution of our products. The same way we can also share our knowledge as far as learnings from India region to his company for expansion in India kind of region.
Good afternoon. My name is Shalaka Joshi. I work with an early stage impact investing firm called Unitas Impact. And we basically make Series A investments that range from about $500,000 to about $3 million in businesses that have livelihood impact. So typically businesses in micro-franchising, rural retail, agribusiness, SME finance that are increasing incomes and or creating jobs for the rural poor. In the last 9 months, we've done 4 investments. 2 have been in India, 1 in Indonesia, and 1 in China. So obviously, we're very interested in looking at connections and collaboration possibilities between India and the rest of the Southeast Asia corridor.
Hi, I'm Scott Lawson from Hong Kong. I'm the CEO of SOW Asia, S-O-W as in plant seeds, not sow as in female pig. We get that a lot. We are a venture philanthropy foundation. We tend not to use that term because a lot of people don't know what it means. We are really pre-impact investors, but even more to the point, we're problem solvers. And I hope that we can talk a bit more about that today with you all in conversation. By problem solving, really we're looking to invest in organizations that have graduated beyond awards, grants, family and friends, but really find themselves at what we call the chasm of death because they're not able to scale to the sort of impact investing that perhaps Shalaka or other organizations might be offering. We're using philanthropic funds, so we feel like we have a little bit more latitude to work in places where the returns will be lower, but we can help those organizations that we invest in to really move up that mountain, as it were, to a point where they can generate some real scale and sustainability. We also work in Hong Kong to build the space in addition to investing, and we think this is important to do simultaneously to educate people about this space that we call the missing middle, but is more accurately called the messy middle. And so we work in Hong Kong to do that. Just briefly on the corridor concept, I think whatever we want to call it, it's extremely important. One of the premises that all of us share about this space, the missing middle, is that we're really looking at problems, at challenges that are too big for even governments to handle. And we're looking at problems that require the resources of a number of different organizations working together in some sort of collective sense. So I only hope the corridor can extend beyond Southeast Asia to include Hong Kong and Singapore and others who are quite interested in what will happen in Southeast Asia. And I want to congratulate IntelliCap and Sunculp for really for having the vision and the fortitude to move beyond India to look at Southeast Asia and opportunities there going forward.
I think I'll very quickly sort of introduce what IntelliCap is trying to do. We started off with this idea of trying to bring business to the concept of development and take a business approach to development, and we've been very active in India in this space, having started off here, and we're going to be completing 10 years this year of our incubation. And we thought, this concept is relevant very much across India and across, regions. And this is our effort to, build this whole ecosystem that we've been trying to build through various services that social enterprises need to gain. Challenges are pretty common across India, across Southeast Asia, in terms of funding challenges, in terms of capacity issues, in terms of, the infrastructure that is required. And, our effort to take Sunculp across to Southeast Asia is also an endeavor in that direction. I think, more than sort of talking about what IntelliCap is doing, what we are interested in is to find out, within this audience, what is this composition of this audience, and what, what sort of, what's the set of entrepreneurs who are here, who are the ecosystem players, who are the investors. So maybe we can have a show of hands in terms of, what this composition is. So how many entrepreneurs do we have in this room? Okay. And do we have any investors looking to invest in this space? Okay, and ecosystem players. So maybe if can start with the entrepreneurs first. Some of you can maybe start off talking about some of the challenges that you find, and what you see a potential of benefiting from this corridor. Any volunteers? Yeah, please. If you can introduce yourself also.
So my name is Manjeet Kripalani, and I'm the co-founder of a foreign policy think tank in Bombay. It's a new concept in India because we don't have so many institutions, and we are trying to build an intellectual institution. Nobody understands it. We can't get, people keep saying, why are you in Bombay and you should be in Delhi? One of the things we do is we write papers, obviously, and a paper is, one of the papers we've written, and the author is here, he's our head of research, is really looking at creating a corridor in the Northeast, which connects the Northeast to Southeast Asia, using Thailand as a partner, and we've modeled it on the Delhi-Mumbai corridor, which creates business, which has partnered with Japan. So it creates a foreign policy engagement with Southeast Asia, as also provides business opportunities, as well as local creative talent, which is used in the Northeast. So the use of English, local bamboos, etc., and creating businesses out of it. So when I came here, I was actually looking for ideas. When you talk about the corridor, we were thinking about how India can look even deeper east with that Northeast corridor, and we actually have a map and a model of it. So we were looking with you folks, when you talk about the social enterprise corridor, are you actually looking at a specific place in Southeast Asia? Are you looking at, what part of India can roll out into Southeast Asia, and how do you make that connection? Can you just really intensify this corridor, looking at the things that all of you do, and maybe perhaps using a pilot project and seeing how you could do it cleverly, actually geographically making the links and creating a pilot where maybe all of you can sit together in a place and have 3 or 4 places that could connect India to the to Southeast Asia.
Sure, it's a very interesting thought.
Yep.
Anybody else would like to add to this amongst the entrepreneurs? Maybe someone from outside India? Yeah, please.
For lack of volunteers, contribute something back. You know, I am new to this process and new to the language and some of the protocols here. But just to speak from my position as you know, a guy that's out there in the field in Indonesia, you know, we have a lot of problems, and we often feel like we're on our own. You know, so having access to a network of people like this is really cool for us. You know, to be able to talk to some people, to get some fresh information, some fresh ideas, and so you know, if I were going to suggest perhaps anything, if there was some way to establish some sort of local go-to person or individual in the countries involved. Mm-hmm. So you say, I got an idea, and then somebody localize it somehow. So localize the process. So it's not sitting in some other country somewhere in another place in Southeast Asia. I think that would be cool. All right.
Sure. So essentially, you're sort of reiterating the need for networks, which can be localized for entrepreneurs. I
mean, you know, we're within means, so you don't add a structure that. You know, if we had just had some sort of office or one sort of go-to person in Indonesia, somebody could pick up a phone and we could talk to, or you know, maybe something. I'm just saying, to have something a little bit more locally oriented in the countries in Southeast Asia, because you know you have time zones, you have problems communicating, and if there was somebody perhaps local.
Sure.
If you allow me,
yeah,
address this particular question. Thank you, Mr. Thanks for your guidance. See, when we are talking about Southeast Asia and India, we are talking on a bigger picture. Let's take a smaller picture on the geographical level of India alone. When you travel from north to south in India alone, every 50 kilometers or 60 kilometers, the language, the tone of the language, the culture, everything changes. But if you ask me globally, the people are same. The basic requirements of people are same. The needs are same. You basically has to understand the basic needs of the people. And if you ask me further, the basic trading habits or business model is again same. Correct me if I'm wrong. So as you correctly said, if you rightly tap the local talent and local people in the initial stage itself of your startups, you will definitely gain much more experience and much more lead in your startup period itself, which will give you really a good boost to leap forward. And I certainly agree with you. Like if you get something as local as Mr. Mark is there in Philippines, that will definitely help you in growing your business. Likewise, when we started Envirofit back in 2007. We started with distributing these cook stores through traditional retail network, and believe me, it was really very difficult to market this product in 4 states of India alone, because each state was having its own language and its own culture. So understanding this language was a primary problem with us. So what we started was identifying local people from the region, and training them, and then taking their help to spread our business across this particular place. But now when we are planning to spread across Southeast Asia, what we are doing is we are identifying people like Mark, who are having ready distribution network, which will reduce down our time to reach the market. So definitely it will help.
Yeah. Good. Good initial thoughts, and I think we will take them on board as we progress through the conversation. But I think one of the purposes of this panel is to have a dialogue in this room itself in terms of Indian audiences understanding the investment and social enterprise landscape in other countries and vice versa. So I'm going to spend a bit of time on that, and we are going to ask questions to entrepreneurs as well as investors who are here on this panel. So let me begin with the Philippines. How is the environment for social enterprise investment in the Philippines? Is the government supportive? Are corporations keen? Is there a huge traction around equity and debt investment? venture philanthropy or pre-impact stage? What is your thinking on that?
Okay. If you look at the Philippines, one industry that is certainly already mature is microfinance. So pretty much that would big check there, right there. But if you look at social enterprises around that space, aside from microfinance, then you've got a movement that is quite frankly a few years old. But it's starting to bubble up pretty much, and we're beginning to see the traction in these past 2 years by an influx of. The way I look at it, there are three sources that are getting into social enterprise in the Philippine context. There are a lot of people fresh out of college actually with bright ideas. However, granted limited experience. There are people in the NGO sector now who are feeling that crunch, who are forced to actually morph into a social enterprise. And third, really are people from corporate, which is my story basically, who then decide that they want to have an impact, and thereby just jumping to the other side. So those are the three sources of social enterprise in the Philippines. What's very interesting is just last month I was in a small group like this one, wherein a lot of different stakeholders and social entrepreneurs are getting together to lobby for regulation, lobby for policies for social enterprises. It doesn't exist right now in the Philippines. So very minimal government support from that sense. They're very supportive of microfinance, but social enterprises in other forms and models, not as much yet. And basically where we're at now is a bunch of us are getting together to sort of push for some policies that could support social enterprises. In terms of the investment community, we look outside actually. So it's a mixture of both. There are in-country high net worth individuals who are starting to look at social enterprises. But right now we're seeing a lot of interest from overseas partners and investors.
Okay. Shalaka, you mentioned about the fact that you've done investments in India through Unitas Impact as well as investments overseas. Is there any qualitative difference you see in the type of enterprises and the preparedness to go scale, go more impact oriented, or do you see the similar features happening both in India and other countries where you invest? So it'll be great to have a perspective on those different parameters.
I actually see more similarities than differences. I think the Indian landscape in terms of impact investing is perhaps a little more mature than some of the landscapes that we're seeing in countries like the Philippines or Vietnam or Cambodia or even Indonesia to a certain extent. So what that means is, from an investor's perspective, there are opportunities to invest in very, very early movers in a country like Indonesia. So our Indonesia investment is just to use an example, it's a mobile minutes play. It would be very hard for me to do a similar investment in India at this stage because there are too many players, and so it's a more crowded market. So the business model has to be really outstanding, which means it's a more mature business model. Whereas my Indonesia investment is earlier stage, right? So I have that flexibility. But leaving aside that difference, the similarities that I see are all in terms of you're all serving BOP populations, you're all looking at ways of reaching that population, you're all, all the models that I'm looking at are using and fixing supply chains in a way that benefit people at the very beginning of supply chains and are using market mechanisms. And I see tremendous similarities there and tremendous scope for synergies where somebody who's looking at a micro franchise model in the Philippines or in an India or in in an Indonesia are fundamentally all addressing the same problems. So it's a mix of both. From the investor's perspective, in some ways I look for earlier stage deals in other countries, and I look for slightly more mature and proven business models in India. So that's a mild differentiator between the two.
Absolutely. Scott?
Thanks. SoAsia invests in China, Greater China, and Southeast Asia. We're sort of geographic agnostic in terms of where we are, especially at the early stage in our own development. We feel the need to really just find the best deals, and so we look across that entire geography, probably with a slight preference for China because we're donor supported, and that's where the hearts of most Hong Kong donors are focused, is on China. Yeah, I do agree with Shalaka, and let me just illuminate that a slightly different way. Did anybody go to the session this morning on agriculture? Were you were there? And there was a member of the panel from a VC fund who was talking about IRR 35%, right? and so it was interesting. That's an example of someone who probably is not going to be moving into the impact investment space anytime soon, right? But even organizations that are moving into the space, not so much in Southeast Asia, but in the region, like for example Acumen or LGTVP, those organizations are their current investment rate is about 1% of the deals that they look at. Okay, so you've got the guy this morning who it's 0, but even the people who are intentionally involved in the space are executing on, say, 1% of their opportunities, and to me this is quite interesting, and I think maybe a point. I know we need to come back to your question in a minute, but the sort of dynamic, the undercurrent at a lot of events like this I attend, is that there are a lot of investors sort of walking around looking for investees, and there are a lot of investees walking around looking for investors, and it's not happening, right? It's not happening. And I think sort of identifying the rub, and we can talk about some of the specifics as they relate to Southeast Asia. There are some things that are specific, but I think there are also some commonalities between Southeast Asia, China, and India that we should also be talking about, because those are issues that really the entire space needs to really address in a very honest fashion. But we do see opportunities in Southeast Asia going forward. Sure. But I say this often. Muhammad Yunus started talking about talking to microfinance in 1971 or something. It was 30 years before he got the Nobel Prize. This is a generational project, and I know we're all impatient and we all want to see great things happen quickly, but it is a nascent space, and I think we need to be committed for the long haul. We need to really get our investors, our donors, and others really thinking in those terms, and especially to you who are social entrepreneurs, just hang in there. I really can't. You guys are my heroes, but just to continue to encourage you to stay the course, but also be open to iterating, changing your model with sort of new knowledge and consultation from others about how you can make your business plan more focused, more effective. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the couple of thoughts that came from Shalaka and Scott as well. One point that Shalaka made was, you're investing across Asia, in India and in Southeast Asia. You spoke about China as well. So, India and China are sort of spoken in different breath versus the rest of Southeast Asia. So is there, and you also spoke about, some agri fund talking about a 35% IRR. And, say a fund, impact investment fund like Acumen, also only selecting 1% of the companies that go through their pipeline for investment. So being a big challenge for any social enterprise, whether it is in India or in Southeast Asia, the funding challenge. Is there a different bar for companies in India and China maybe versus the rest of Southeast Asia? Do you have a slightly lower bar? And what is that bar? At what level is that bar? Is it a 10%? Is it 20%? Is it 30%? Because these are also very early stage, so higher risk, higher return. So where does that bar really fit? Maybe Shalaka, you would like to answer that.
For the most part, no, there isn't a different bar, because it has to be a business model that has heavy potential for scale, strong impact, strong financial returns, because we are actually an financial return first investor, and a great entrepreneur, all the other elements that you look at when you're investing in a company. I think the difference comes in terms of the definition of, say, scale, right? So we were having a chat before this panel, and Mark said, India is like, it's like its own continent, right? Because every state has so many people and so many different models that when you're talking about scale in India, if you say, hey, I've saturated all of Andhra Pradesh or all of Maharashtra, you're still reaching millions of people. And so your concept of scale is a little different. But when I'm looking at a much smaller country geographically, and I talk about saturating that country, in some ways those concepts are in parallel. So the notion of size in scale shifts a little bit depending on the countries that we're looking at. So that's one difference that comes up. The other difference is actually I see more opportunity in some ways in Southeast Asia or other countries in South Asia, because there's just tremendous first mover advantage. They're newer economies. Sure, there's some more complications politically or regulation-wise, but there's just less competition in the market and also in the impact investing market. So, and there's pluses and minuses to that. It means that your entrepreneurs haven't necessarily worked with investors before. The process takes slightly longer. We try to bring in, a local investor into every investment that we make in countries outside of India as sort of a political net, just in case something goes wrong, because we want to protect the enterprise that we're committed to supporting. So we find different ways around it, but I see just tremendous opportunity there for first mover advantages.
Okay. Also another related point, since you've sort of touched upon it, people talk about, and this is an argument against, why are we talking about this India, Southeast Asia corridor, because India being such a large company, and this is an argument that constantly gets thrown at enterprises, so I'll ask you to answer that. Is there really need to look beyond, because the general argument that you get is India is such a large company, why do you need to bother about going into another country, new set of regulation, new culture, new language, and in India itself you have to deal with all of that. So have you come across that? Is that a real issue? How are you sort of countering that?
If you ask me categorically as far as Envirofit is concerned and the product is concerned, in India alone the opportunity is vast.
Correct.
To cater alone India will take at least another 10 years for us to reach every household which is using our kind of product. But if you ask me in other contexts, there are other business opportunities, other business benefits rather, which are good opportunities as far as government rules and regulations or international rules and regulations are concerned when we talk about Southeast Asia corridor. Because if you compare Indian government regulations versus these other parts of world, it is very easy to get certain permissions, certain regulations in our favor compared to India, wherein you get good benefits on the smaller scale of business. So yes, of course, if you ask me, there is huge opportunity outside India also, but India alone will definitely give you a good size of business.
Actually, I think it will be helpful to sort of get more specific, because you've touched upon an important point on government regulation, and I think that's where there's scope for huge amount of learning. If you take the example of microfinance itself, India stands out for not allowing savings, whereas in most parts of an ECB, whereas in most part of rest of Asia, savings are allowed, ECB is allowed. Likewise, you spoke about setting up this foreign policy think tank. I think there's huge need for a body like that, because there's so much stuff that is happening across so many different countries, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel each time. So maybe you could add something on that. Is there something that India could learn in terms of regulation from some of these other countries?
So, in fact, India and ASEAN have signed a free trade agreement,
right,
FTA, and it's almost complete. What would be great is if entrepreneurs or institutions that look at this get together and go to the Ministry of External Affairs and actually present to them some way where social enterprises can engage with each other within this FTA, so that there can be common regulations. There's none of those regulatory hurdles,
right,
or fewer regulatory hurdles to cross, because it comes within the FTA. So that's one idea, and it will really simplify the whole idea of social enterprises across the board in Asia. Could be interesting.
I think that's a great suggestion.
Right. No, absolutely. In fact, I do agree that the kind of intellectual outcome, and I heard about your work at Yale, where I first came to know about it when I was teaching there in 2009, and glad that you could make it to IntelliCap Forum and Sankalp Forum this time. But the idea is, yes, social entrepreneurs would not consume the kind of intellect you are offering, and it would possibly travel only between academic and policymaker circles. So the gap between what you talk of as intellectual strategy and its absorption by the wider community still stays. So having said that, I think the moot question here to 2-3 questions. One is, how do we expand the definition of the word corridor? Is it only market expansion, which means I sell you my products because your regulations are good? Or is it something beyond that in terms of providing an ecosystem for entrepreneurs to benefit from each other across countries? So there was a suggestion that where do I go to? So for example, today I want to open a business in Washington, D.C., so I can go to their office in Bangalore, and I can know everything which is there to know of how to do business in Washington, D.C. So are we alluding to that kind of a concept? I want the panel now to discuss what is this corridor concept going to emerge as if we want to make it successful. You would debate and argue that this is a corridor. Sankalp Forum is a corridor in any case. So then why do we need one more corridor? But I think what I'm trying to say is, let's take examples of many entrepreneurs who will be compelled to become entrepreneurs because there are so many less jobs being created worldwide. So you will be pushed into entrepreneurship. If you look at impact, even the people who are in the unorganized sector because of low-paying jobs will be pushed to become some kind of entrepreneur or the other, who perhaps may not even see the likes of us in any forum because they are not so evolved. So are we talking about inclusive business right from bottom up? And is that the concept of corridor? So I'm just wanting the panel to brainstorm on these issues. I'm not saying any of this is right or wrong, but I think we need to define or redefine the concept of corridor as something going beyond normal communication. And yes, you had something to add to it? Yeah.
Thank you very much for adding this layer of the matrix. I truly wanted to ask you to add an element of non-geographic, actually more in terms of defining beneficiaries. I work in a university in Kerala called Amritapuri, and I just joined there in trying to develop their social enterprise and social innovative perspective. The thing that kind of struck me when I arrived there is that social innovation and social enterprise is a matter of individualists that are facing a problem. They're not entrepreneurs per se, and like the fellow here, they feel very lonely, they feel very isolated, sometimes they don't speak the language, and not only the language of social entrepreneurship, but they just speak Malayalam, they don't even speak English. So actually this corridor doesn't even apply to them, north, east, they don't even care about that. What really matters to them is how do you face their problem, how do you translate this into a solution, and not ready-made solutions by, let's say, bankers that see an opportunity to tap into the BOP sector, but people that really care about the impact that they will have, and how instead of translating business modeling from the corporate sector or what we heard about hard capitalism into their needs and their readings, but the opposite way. How can you translate their needs, take their hands, and bring them up the ladder from bottom up and not really up down, which is a lot of what I heard so far. So thank you for opening this conversation, and opening a new dimension in the debate.
It's a very important question, and I'll just quickly add to what you're trying to say. Yes, indeed, like we heard that perhaps in terms of commercial capital doing social enterprise investment, it's 1% of the pie. But in terms of real people on the ground accessing the kind of people sitting here, that's also 1%. So how do you really then extend the concept of corridor to include the left out and those of us who also face genuine problems as entrepreneurs? So
well, actually, thank you for opening that up. I've been at this this will be my 5th year. So this is sort of like my second life. I spent 7 years in corporate. So our history really is 2 high school classmates who went to 2 different paths. My co-founder actually went into government and public service, and I went into Unilever. So I had a very corporate leaning, but I had always wanted to make an impact. Now he was in public service, and he wanted to explore more sustainable models. And so pretty much around 4 years ago, we got together along with our founding board and put up this social enterprise called Happy Noy. And I want to talk about what you were saying, that we wanted to attack a problem, yes. But quite frankly, Bam and I were approaching it from 2 different paradigms. He was looking at it from a social development perspective that needed to be sustainable. I was looking at it from a business model that could certainly have an impact. And actually as early as a year into it, then things started to blend. And I guess that's one key to what creates our DNA, is that we are a fusion really of social development and business in Happy Noy. And now I could truthfully say that I'm probably half already, wherein I see it as an integrated whole. Whereas before it was a business perspective with a bias for development. In terms of, you talk about entrepreneurs, seeing opportunities, and solving that problem. Yes, we recognize the social problem, but 2-3 years later, realize that in as much as your mission is to solve poverty or livelihood, you can't scale it unless there's a business model. Quite frankly, that's just the way it is. You can't scale and grow something if it's not sustainable, and you have to talk both languages. I guess that's what we've also learned. You have to talk both the language of development, but you also have to talk the language of business. And you have to combine those two, and I guess that's been my experience. Now, having said that, it's not been easy. And I want to talk a little bit about what Scott was saying, and that we've iterated. And sometimes my co-founder and I joke that we're in version 14 of our enterprise. And that's just the way it is. We're on our, actually, 5th year this year, and version 14. And yesterday I presented to the panel the latest version, which we feel actually now, after 4 years, has become crystal clear. And so many iterations. And at every turn of the corner, you realize that there's stuff you don't know. And as an entrepreneur, it's very important not to fall too in love with your idea. You have to evolve. You hit a wall and you realize there's a blank space here. You need to find people, or you need to find new ideas to sort of like navigate around that. And that's just really the way it is. So, and it's not easy, but again, that goes back to the fundamental reason why I set it up, which is to have impact, make it sustainable, and make it scalable. So I guess just wanted to provide a bit of insight.
Sure.
And I know I skirted the corridor piece a bit, but I couldn't help but build on what you were talking about.
No, absolutely. It's like extending the corridor to people who matter. That's where that comment was coming from. Any thoughts on this inclusion, growth? We are the evolved lots who have access to resources. Still others on the bottom of the pyramid who would not even. Is corridor concept relevant to this thinking?
Yeah. To the teacher and Carola, interesting question. If I understood it correctly, we had a social enterprise summit in Hong Kong last November that attracted about 1,000 people from around the region coming together to talk about social enterprise. And in China, there is a huge amount of social enterprise activity happening at the local level, and it functions at that level because they're below the radar, and it just works, and that's great, and we need to celebrate that. But it's quite important, I think, that we begin to identify both on the funding side. I mean, you've heard Shakala say that she is a financial first impact investor. We are an impact first impact investor. It sounds jargony, but I think it's important for us to begin to understand where we are in the space, and especially for social entrepreneurs, because in Hong Kong, for example, most of the social enterprises are charitable organizations that decide they want to build some revenue generating stream, all right? But they're never going to reach self-sustainability. They open a restaurant or a hair care salon. They don't know about running a business. They run into problems. They hemorrhage a lot of government money. It's created a lot of skepticism about the space. They're good organizations. They are creating some impact, but I think it's important that they be identified as such in a different way than the kind of organizations we're sponsoring. So I just think there is a need for clarity. And then once we're clear about where we are as an organization, as a social enterprise, that, I think, makes it easier to then identify the types of funding, the types of resources or support organizations we can go to who understand our DNA, right, and can really help us in a way maybe the current sort of superstar thinking about social enterprise maybe isn't so helpful, if that makes sense.
Also, I think, Shalaka, you wanted to add?
So just building on what Scott was saying, I think that identifying where you are on that spectrum, whether as an entrepreneur or an investor or somebody who's working on a think tank, is critical. And just to clarify what we meant by financial first, it just means that as your business grows, what's embedded in the business model is that your impact will grow, because that's how your business is created. So it's not necessarily coming from the we want 35% IRR perspective. It's just coming from what is going to be a model that actually works and reaches a large number of people, which is a definition of impact in itself. The second thing that I just wanted to touch on really quickly was I actually think the India-Southeast Asia corridor kind of elements of it already exist, especially in terms of conversations with entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs, and Mark I think is a classic example, don't know the meaning of the word no, right? So if you hit a problem, you're just going to talk to whoever the hell you can and figure out how to solve it, which means you're going to reach out to every single person you know, from school, from family, from friends, and say, hey, do you know of anybody else anywhere in the world who's doing anything remotely like this, right? I can guarantee you, I don't know whether this is true, that Mark will have talked to 10 people in India who are thinking of doing similar things that he is doing in the Philippines or are already doing them. And all the entrepreneurs that I work with do this anyway. So, I mean, it's helpful to them to work with an organization like UI that, has connections in all the countries. But even if we didn't exist, they would be doing this anyway. So I think for the entrepreneur, they're going to find a way to do it. And thinking through the India Southeast Asia social enterprise corridor, it's much more about how to add value to sort of the ecosystem around, because entrepreneurs really, they just find a way. And it's up to us to kind of figure out how do you open source some of the solutions that are being created. And I actually see that as our responsibility. So it's very much part of my job description and how I understand the role that my company is playing in saying, okay, there's an amazing solution that exists in X country. When I go to Y country, I talk about that solution, or I learn or try to add to that solution and really try to share some of the value that's being created across geographies. And I mean, I feel like if everybody in the ecosystem started doing that, just in very small ways, that goes a long way towards eventually building a corridor anyway.
Sure.
Yeah, that, and also I think the point that I was sort of trying to bring in was there's a lot of learning on the positive side that can be had. Also because, let's say, because this movement is possibly more evolved in India, there's a lot of learning even from kind of mistakes or things not to do. So maybe if, any of you would like to add on that things that the other less evolved countries can use or take from India as an example.
I think they can all learn from the Andhra Pradesh government how not to ruin an entire movement. I'm being facetious, but I actually think that's important when you're looking at new countries that may have very difficult regulatory environments, and I've certainly used it as an instance to say you never know what kind of political trouble you're hitting in the most evolved sort of quote-unquote social enterprise landscapes. So,
yeah, I mean, while you were using it as a bit of a snide remark there, but the point is that even if, let's say, you didn't have anything to do or didn't have any control over government action, there were a lot of learnings that one could carry even from that incident itself in terms of what the microfinance institutions could have proactively done, because there were a lot of institutions who were doing a lot of good work. I'm not saying that there was nothing wrong and it was all sacrosanct what they were doing, but there were a lot of things that they could have proactively done in engaging with the media, for instance, sort of building information around what they were doing actually on the ground, the kind of impact that they were creating, which would have been very, very helpful. And the learnings also for the governments from each other.
And just to actually answer the question that you asked, I think there's a lot of a lot of the businesses that I'm seeing in Southeast Asian countries have really learned from some of the mistakes that early experiments in India in particular have made, and you can see that in how their business models are created. And so what you're seeing is an early stage, first mover advantage, but more sophisticated business model because they've definitely learned from things that have gone wrong, not just in India, but in Bangladesh, in Latin America, in a whole bunch of other different geographies.
Right. Before, yeah, sure.
Isn't social enterprise being taught at business schools, and do they learn anything, or are they so far removed from the actuality of social enterprise that this is not helping at all?
It is being
and
taught.
And what happens to students who actually learn? Do they get into social enterprise, or do they go off and work with Shell?
Well, there's a huge, anyway, Shell also is starting a lot of social enterprise, that should be fine. But, right. But to your question, there is a huge movement across business schools, and not only in US and Europe, but also in India. And I've been in so many forums. I have taught social enterprise courses in business schools, and schools are taking it positively because they do realize that of course, the debate around capitalism is raging in this forum as well, and it rages worldwide in terms of would pure chasing money help in the absence of consumers who can purchase products and services. Yale has a huge global social enterprise program. I sit with them in terms of strategizing the program on the ground. Yale students come, so does Harvard, so does Columbia. So these are universities from abroad which have placed students successfully last 3, 4, 5 years into Indian social enterprises to design the strategy for scale, funding, growth, human resource management, and these enterprises are delivering on that strategy. Sometimes helps them a lot because funders ask them these questions and they don't have the answers. So business schools have been playing that role. In India, ISB has also a social enterprise movement. It has been talked about in the paper which Intellicap has circulated on the corridor concept. So there is huge traction there. It's building. In fact, it's almost very easy to say nowadays that come summer and you'll have at least 2,000 students in India from various universities working with social enterprises. And that's a given. Many of them would have interned with the entities on this panel as well.
But that's not where the entrepreneurs are coming from.
No,
they are.
The entrepreneurs are coming from, NNIMS and all the smaller institutes.
Really, from various. You're right. But from the point is, people are now looking at a career in the social enterprise sector after being an MBA from Harvard. And I think that's important to understand. I know many enterprises who have just taken a job for 3 years, a sales job right out of business school, just to have sufficient personal capital to start their own venture. So that movement and that traction is also seen. Sorry, Anurag, you were saying something.
No, I was just giving the example that he talked about earlier. There are 3 very distinct categories of people, not just in Philippines, but across in India and I guess the rest of the region as well. So there is this corporate group, people who've been in the corporate world for a good number of years, who've been coming back. Umesh himself is an example of that. And of course Mark as well. And there's this NGOs who are trying to convert, who've been in the development sector and moving from there. And there's a very significant chunk of people who are fresh out of colleges or very early in their careers making that choice as well. And across all B schools, I went to B school about 10, 12 years ago, and from that point onwards, today, if you look at the curriculum of B schools, it's undergone a huge amount of change. And I think across all tiers of B school, not just the top-notch, even the second rung, third rung institutes, there's greater awareness about this.
That's a good academic corridor.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
If you ask me, ma'am, see, there are 4, 5 things which are very, very important as far as social enterprise is concerned. A, to start with innovation. It is very important. B, experience. Then third is adaptability. And fourth is patience. As you rightly said, fresh students, they are not, coming into the social enterprise and all these things. See, innovation is not, everybody's cup of tea. When you talk about social enterprise, you need to understand what is social enterprise is. And at the end of the day, there is no enough charitable fund to, support all these social enterprises. You have to generate funds out of your business itself. There has to be sustainability module out of your business. And for that purpose, you need certain experience from corporate world. And then only, as far as my opinion is concerned, then only your social enterprise will, succeed.
Okay.
The other important point I just wanted to touch upon is, again, Shalaka had alluded to it, is that increasingly, you're living in a more globally sort of connected world. And it's these networks, the social media, etc., which are also playing a huge role in building that corridor. So it's no longer those barriers across countries, etc.
Nobody is isolated.
Right. So, that itself is a huge facilitator in building that corridor as well.
Right. You had something
I would like to bring just kind of an example of what you were just saying. Now, coming back to the Northeast segregation you were doing. I myself am an INSEAD alumni of the INSEAD Social Entrepreneurship Program, so I guess I'm an example of an MBA grad or a student from the north coming to try to put in place some social enterprise experience here. That before being a teacher. Now, what we're trying to teach now in Amrita University is the fact that to be able to understand the grassroots level and to be able to understand problems and translate them into solutions, you do not only have to look into MBA programs, be they from Mumbai University, which Yunus by by the way, just collaborated with to build a 50 Kron award for social enterprise in January this year, but as well to build multidisciplinary teams. So not only including MBAs, but including social workers, including engineers, people that will understand the problems and translate them into solutions. And what is even more important in our university is that it is youngsters, people that come from the villages where those solutions or actually those problems are hit upon. I'm talking about waste management here. I'm talking about services to elderly people. Really, people that are understanding the beneficiaries better than anybody else. This is where we believe that the new solutions are going to come from people that understand the beneficiaries, speak their language, come from their communities, but as well people that can communicate with one another in a very multidisciplinary way. Thank you.
In fact, I would like to add another segment here, what we tend to call intrapreneurs. These are people within large corporate houses who are pushing this social agenda very aggressively. And again, you know, given that these institutions have large resources, again, there's huge potential to create a lot of impact. So they may not be entrepreneurs in the classical sense, but by virtue of, you know, the resources that they have access to, can also play a huge role.
This is an absolutely valid point, because that is in a way also redefining the contours of a corridor, because I remember my experience in HSBC in Ogilvy, wherein I had to wear the entrepreneur hat, just so that these two institutions understand what is microfinance, what is Sankalp, what is Avishkar, what do these people do, because otherwise no corporate business leader who has eye on the bottom line is going to say, Monday morning I'll get up and also understand social enterprises. They would not. So you need a tempered radical inside the organization to be able to bring issues to the fore. So I think this is also a very valid point. So I think what Anurag is also saying is, let's not be a victim of definitions, but also try and see how we can really make sense by working together. And I think one more point which the panel in the debrief discussed before we came on the stage here is to ask all of you, what is your pain point? You've heard all of us speak, you've heard others speak. Can you tell us some pain points on cost of due diligence very high, investors take 4 years to give a decision, charitable funds come with a caveat or strings attached, friends and family don't give money. What is it that is your grudge in terms of your experience in entrepreneurship, your experience in running an NGO, your experience in being an investor? We have some investors here, I saw some hands earlier. So just feel free and liberal enough to voice your opinion of what is your pain point. And we'll try and address that in some cohesive way. We need more participation, that we could go on and on. So if nobody asks a question,
yes.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Sanawala. We're a talent development initiative called EDGE. We connect talent and develop talent from emerging markets and connect into businesses that serve the base of the pyramid. So while you were talking about corridor, and then you spoke about exchanging strategies, exchanging ideas, and talking about investments, firms in India investing other organizations in different markets. I was wondering, is there a possibility of exchange of talent within the South Asian corridor, where students from probably Philippines coming to India and working businesses over here, which focus on BOP, and while similarly students from India or young graduates from India going to Philippines or Indonesia, working on an internship or fellowship program around these. So I wanted to see, how do you see this? Is this going to help the space, building space in your specific markets?
Sure.
Absolutely. In fact, such initiatives are already there. I don't know if Hemant is in the room anymore. I saw him at the beginning. But for instance, there's this initiative called the IDEX, which is trying to place fellows in various social enterprises from across the world, not just Southeast Asia. There are these regular exchange programs in the business schools where this is happening as well. So I think there are a lot of such initiatives that are cropping up. They're possibly not enough at the moment, so they're just small examples. But yes, there is increasing.
So just a small aside on that, I think it's great when that exists, when the social enterprise or the enterprise has the ability to absorb and actually use the kind of talent that's coming there. One thing that I'm always a little bit wary of is saying, your entrepreneur is really busy running a business, and the entrepreneur doesn't want somebody there for a very short span of time who's going to be able to understand and add value to the business in a very superficial way. So I'll just say there's gradations and different ways in which you can use the kind of skills. So it's great if somebody has a strong business analysis skill set and there's a social enterprise that needs a business plan written, who can go there and help them. It's not so great if you're going to go there for an already running business and spend a month or just 2 months trying to really understand how that business operates in a very different geography. So there has to be some amount of, I guess, just your entrepreneur weighing in on how best to use the kind of skills and that you can then offer.
Yeah, and another way to think about it possibly is, for the career development and exposure of the individual themselves. And what we are seeing, and in fact, this is something that we're actively discussing in our own company as well, is the possibility of secondment to enterprises. And not, a 1 month, 2 month stint, but slightly longer, 6 month duration, where you can make a meaningful difference.
So one of the things that we have just started experimenting with is saying, if you're looking at how to spread models, if you're making an investment in a country, say outside of India, can somebody go and work with that entrepreneur for 2 to 3 years, in a role that entrepreneur defines as adding value to that business, and then potentially take some elements of that model, having really understood it, and attempt to apply it to a different geography. So it's something we're thinking about, but I have to say finding people for that kind of effort has proven very difficult at this point.
Yeah, there is a question here.
My name is Pradeep Chaudhary. I'm with the Indian Institute for Sustainable Enterprise. I want to build on something you mentioned earlier about working with entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs. One of the things we are finding is, when I work with an entrepreneur, I have to mentor him and walk him through a number of different steps before we are able to really get and launch and scale the business. On the other hand, when you go to the larger companies, we find that the larger companies many times have a solution, have a problem for which there is a defined solution. But there is still some gaps. They still want to take it to the next level. But there's nobody within the organization who really understands how to really do it. So what we are trying to do at this institute is matching entrepreneurs with entrepreneurs. And I'm telling the entrepreneur, yes, you have an interesting problem, but these are 20 hoops that you have to go through. Let me take you to this corporation who will take you under their wings. So once you are able to prove the problem, once we are able to really work with them, the resources are there, the scaling is there, the dealer network is there, the distribution is there. So I think that the key bottom line for us is to really think of innovative business models that one can really use, where you bring in and create an ecosystem and bring in different partners who can really work to solve these problems. Because there's no question that when you're looking at the BOP market and the triple bottom line areas, the problems are really massive. And you really need something other than the VC, something other than the conventional sources to really go and make things work. So coming up with the innovative business models, creating an ecosystem, working with different groups, I think maybe one way, and that's what we're trying to do.
Do you have some success stories? Is it?
We are getting started.
Yeah.
When I moved from Michigan, I was with Dr. C.K. Prahlad, and we are getting some interesting things. But we already have 4 or 5 interesting problems that we're working on.
Yeah.
And this is, ma'am, to your point about institutes, this is a great example of a professor from Michigan moving back to India to set up the Indian Institute of Sustainable Enterprise. So, there's a lot of momentum on that front.
Yeah, we are looking for entrepreneurs. That's the reason I'm here, to see how we can really match them and help improve the success for both the companies as well as the entrepreneurs.
Just India or regional or?
We are starting with India, but I think the problems are really global in scope. So we are looking at different possibilities in different areas.
More questions? Yes.
Hi, I'm a fellow in Jaipur Rugs. I'm from Eastern Europe, that is Romania. I've been working with Jaipur Rugs for 1 year, and I agree with you that, yes, you have to stay for more than 6 months, at least 1 year. I have already 1 year and 2 months in order to understand the business. But my question is, in terms of my experience in Sankalp till now, I'm a little bit disappointed. That is because I don't see any. It's a mixture of, which is good. Mixture of people is good, but it's a mixture of opinion. Not that only each one of us has a different definition of social enterprises, but also we tend to talk about the C.K. Prahlad movement as a social entrepreneurship movement. And I don't think it's really matching according to my idea, because I would want to see, as a 25 young girl from Eastern Europe coming to India to work in the social entrepreneurship environment, I would want to see social enterprises working, existing for solving problems of society, being different from inclusive strategies that whosoever multinational or other companies would do, including BOP in the model that you have. Of course, it attracts automatically impact, as you said, but that I hope that will not be the limit of social entrepreneurship in movement, because that's not enough. I don't want to start that kind of business. I would not want. Okay, fine. Those who are already existing, they can start inclusive strategies to include and address them as producers or consumers. But me, as a young as a young entrepreneur, hopefully in 1 year, I would want to start a business because I have the power to generate money while solving a problem in my community and other communities similar to that. So my question is, what is the difference if, maybe in a relative way, what is the difference between inclusive business and social business?
Who wants to take that?
It's a perfectly valid, wonderful question. And I mean, I don't really have an answer other than to say I think there's this huge umbrella of models that we all talk about and a whole bunch of buzzwords, a lot of which we've been throwing around in the course of this panel, that range from social enterprise, social business, inclusive business. I think every stakeholder kind of almost defines it for themselves. So I can only speak to kind of my definition of it, and I know everybody else on this panel will have their own take on it. So within that backdrop, I think it's perfectly acceptable for you to define it exactly as you want to define it, without letting any of our, our tropes kind of inform your definition of it. I really, one comment that I'll make that's a little bit tangential is one of the most exciting things that I've been seeing as part of the work that we're doing is social activists, not just social entrepreneurs, but social activists who've been working on the rights of particular groups of people for years and years and years, are suddenly starting to explore sort of the market. So what I call kind of the entrepreneurial social enterprise approach, social business approach to things as a possible solutions. To use just one example, there's a group that we've been working with that works with salt producers in Gujarat. And these salt producers make 1% of what the salt sells for in the retail market, and have extremely difficult living conditions. And the entrepreneur who's been working with this group of salt workers has been working with them for 20 years. The salt workers actually own part of the business. They buy equity in the form of salt. So it's a very much comes from what has been kind of classically the non-profit mindset or classically the rights mindset. But he started looking more and more at the market as a way of adding more value to the salt workers. Because he sees the potential of it growing very exponentially. And that's his call. I'm not saying all rights activist people or nonprofits have to go down that path, but he's just made up his own definition of social enterprise, and that's his definition of it. And I think it's a wonderful example of how it's good to have sort of somewhat amorphous definitions in this case. I know that doesn't answer your question at all. It was,
I would like to respond to that as well, because this is a constant debate that we also have within our own company. What is social, what is not, are we into social, are we into inclusive business? In fact, even what we say about IntelliCab is hotly debated within our company. My personal take is what I can talk about here is that why should we even bother about the definition? If you're talking about yourself, how is the definition important, whether it's called inclusive business or social business? You will know when you are trying to do something, whether it makes sense for you to do it or not. And whether it really actually makes a difference. That's the bottom line, really, right? Yeah. That what you are doing, is it really creating some sort of impact to somebody? So I think that is more critical rather than getting caught up in this web of definitions.
Just the reason I think the definitions are important is that right now we're seeing a scenario where social purpose organizations, like the one I think you're talking about, you want to be a part of, are positioning themselves as impact investment opportunities. and it's just creating some distortions. And I think it's, as Shalaka said, just claim your space, name it and claim it. That's good. And then, but again, once you're there, I think we need to help you be able to identify who are the resources, where are the resources that can help you to establish the organization that you want to establish. But it begins with sort of you being clear about where you are and you being okay about that, right?
Let me quickly add a perspective before you ask your question. I think at the end of the day, I have always said that there is no difference, to give an example, between the two types of CSR, corporate social responsibility and corporate sales responsibility. The fact of the matter is a company selling toothpaste and preventing tooth decay is as much a social enterprise as somebody who manufactures low-cost toothpaste and sells it for a fraction of the price. It's just the former doesn't look at environmental impacts of waste disposal of packaging, so on and so forth, therefore does not become a classical social enterprise from that perspective. So I think in terms of alluding to differences or similarities, yes, these are vectors. Social business or social inclusion or inclusive growth are definitional terms to convince a particular set of stakeholders about the right and wrongs of doing things in a particular way. But I think at the end of the day, corporations today will move towards doing more and more of social impact work because they know that the consumers at the bottom of the pyramid would not be for long able to afford their products until the purchasing power is created for them to buy those products. So there is a understanding from that perspective, so the business becomes a social business, even if it's a toothpaste manufacturing company. And rightfully so for social enterprises too, they will have to play to developmental strengths and create social impact also, because otherwise their products too will not sell in the market. So you have 3 million NGOs in this country and you have 30,000 social enterprises and you have government departments. Ultimately, the consumer beneficiary is the same. Where would they gravitate towards? Free stuff from the government, free stuff from the NGO, or priced stuff from the social enterprise? So that's where I think Scott and I were discussing that you need to define the concept of corridor also from the impact perspective to include beneficiaries who are at a particular stage in their lives. So what will work for them? I'm happy to see this year, Sankalp Forum has a lot of NGOs. Classically, you don't have NGOs coming into a social investment forum and vice versa. So I think NGOs have a role to play. Coupled with that, like you said, some of them wanting to create businesses, that also has a role to play. And I think all of us have a role to play to accept all those models in whatever form they are, just to ensure that more people benefit on the ground.
Very quickly, I see these entities as forms. So social business, social enterprise, nonprofit, etc. As I guess a perspective as an entrepreneur, you really start with something you want to solve, and you dig at it, and you push at it, and you just keep on attacking it. And at some point, you're gonna have to realize what form does your organization have to take in order to attack that problem. Like in our case, we started purely as a for-profit because we believed that we needed a business that could scale. But 3 years later, we realized that our form had to evolve. And right now, we're a hybrid social enterprise. So we have a for-profit and a foundation that works together. So again, these are, but the mission hasn't changed at all. We're still attacking the same problem that we were very passionate about solving from the very beginning. But you just have to evolve into and have clarity on what form do you begin to take in order to start engaging with different stakeholders, whether that be social investors, whether that be donor organizations, whether that be government. But at some point, you're going to have to be clear about what that form is. But I guess what you don't compromise is, the reason you set yourself out on this path in the first place, which is the mission or the problem you're trying to solve.
Absolutely. I know there were some more questions, but we will have to wrap up. I'm sure you can interact with all of us individually or jointly in the breakout sessions. I'm just going to do a quick round of here to give your one-line pitch on where do you see the corridor concept evolving and what role your company or your firm would have to play, so that people who would benefit from then wanting to relate to you in a specific way. So starting in the environment, what would you like to say? A few words.
Yeah. With this social corridor kind of thing, we would like to definitely start communicating with people from Southeast Asia who are into same sector, and would like to understand the experiences from their local region, which can be helpful for us, and also would like to share the same experience of ours for these people to benefit.
Shalakam, some closing remarks?
We're basically going to continue doing exactly what we've been doing, which is look for exciting opportunities in India and in Southeast Asia. So we'd love to hear from you if you operate in either of the geographies. So long as you have sort of some strong livelihood and a sustainable business model. And we're happy to facilitate conversations because we know people kind of in all these spaces. So if any of you feel like you can benefit from talking to people in particular countries and want to weigh in, we're happy to help in. So please feel free to reach out.
Scott, you said you are geography agnostic. Would that expand into India?
India's a long way from Hong Kong, so probably one reason.
Calcutta is very close to it.
Yeah, one reason we're not looking at India is because the infrastructure does seem to be so well developed here. I guess just for me in closing, bad news, good news. The bad news is I think Southeast Asia is maybe 10 years behind in terms of the development of the necessary infrastructure, the corridor, what have you. The good news is that I think Southeast Asia can do in 2 years what might take another region 10 years, in part because they can leverage on the experiences and the mistakes in a country like India. And so India and Sankalp and Telecap have a lot to offer Southeast Asia, and I would just encourage you to continue the engagement. And I think we're going to see things move quite rapidly in Southeast Asia, relatively speaking.
Anurag, from Intellicap perspective, how would you wrap this all up?
I already said it for me, but this is our initiative to take the Sankalp program to Southeast Asia. Plan is to take it pan-Asia. We also plan to extend it to Africa as well down the line. So, the idea is we are living in a global connected world and to learn from each other and build an ecosystem which social enterprise, inclusive business, whatever you may call it, thrives to meet the end objectives.
Absolutely. Great. It has been a pleasure having all of you on the dais. Thank you for all of you who asked questions, participated, and also those who are in this room who would have questions subsequently. It's my pleasure to thank all the panelists on behalf of the Sankalp Forum for an engaging discussion, and hope you are able to walk in the corridor with grace and profitable outcomes and social.
We also have some smaller questions.
Fast. That's right. Tell you.
That's right.
Mark.
Bigger than life.
So you have got us framed in the corridor. Yes, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. A big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you for taking the time to attend this session.